open office hours. We're continuing our theme this week of preparing you for the task of doing a test review of data migration. And last week we had some demonstrations on the types of records you wanted to find and some general purpose techniques for preparing to do data review, such as evaluating reports on the numbers of records that were migrated and errors that did not. This week we're going to take a brief look at some searches in different areas of Alma that will help you identify help you locate the records that you already identified as your testing examples. And this is to give you a sort of rundown on the searches that make the most sense or will give you the most bang for the buck as you try to find these records. And we'll have some options that are very specific and some options that will let you do some broader sweeps through the system to do some more general comparisons. So what you might expect is that the quickest and easiest way is to just do title searches for any bibliographic records. And actually, I should stop and say, I'm going to start out by covering the cataloging type searches, bibs, Mfhds, and items, and then talk about finding acquisitions data that's migrated. And then I'll hand off to Debbie who will help you identify searches that are good for finding fulfillment data. We can look for resources just by doing title searches, and you've seen I've done several here as well. And I'm just going to start off with a search for a social resource. If I had identified this as basically any record that I wanted to locate, you can just do a straight physical titles, title search social. And there are a number of options here in the search list for you to go through. Title and keywords and names are probably going to be the most valuable options here. You probably want to avoid some of the more ephemeral options, like the call number ones. They have a different definition depending on where you're searching. Also interesting is if you were trying to search for things by ISBN or ISSN, you're not seeing those listed explicitly here. Here we are, but you could also search for standard number, and that's a more general search. What we've found, or what I've been finding so far, is that you're going to get a lot more valuable search experience by using the advanced search to look for migrated resources. And that's because you get some more granular search options this way than if you just do the general keyword search, which is the more basic. First of all, you can make sure that you are selected at the institution zone level. Right now, you are looking for your own bibs, your own records that migrated, so you want to be sure that you're searching institutionally. Secondly, is if you are doing your searches for physical resources, anything that has a bib, Mfhd, and item combination, you'll want to be sure that you choose either the physical titles or physical items search options. If you are checking out things that might be on your P2E list, things that would have converted to portfolios, then you would choose to search electronic titles or electronic portfolios. We had a little bit of that last week, and there'll be more coverage of searching the P2E conversion in our next week's presentation. So I'm going to dedicate the rest of my time to looking at the physical resources. So I could again do my title search and contains keywords, or I could choose to say search with a phrase or starts with. And this is going to be the title search that most commonly matches to the title search that you did in Voyager cataloging client, where it's a left-anchored title search. And so I can now do starts with social. And here we have an example, social history of England. We have some other options here where it's social media in Iran. I'm guessing these two bibs have other titles that popped up where social was the start of the phrase.
Yeah, you read if you were muted.
Oh, hi, please be sure you've muted your mics until we're ready for Q&A. Thanks. You're going to want to try to find a lot of things by record number, and hopefully you've in your examples, you've identified the at least the OCLC record number for resources that are your test examples. And OCLC record number is not an explicit option on these search menus, but you can get to that from the other system number screen. And then from there, you can choose to do, again, a keyword search, a phrase, starts with, etc. And I'm going to borrow a record number here from this screen that exists right away, and copy, and save myself a trip for an example. And that, just to demonstrate, showing an OCLC number search. I can also leave out the OCOLC and the OCLC number by itself without even that prefix. Other system number, that's going to be really super valuable. You could also, in some institutions, you'll be able, and you'll also be able to search for the Voyager record ID in this approach, because if records have migrated and they are not linked to the network zone record, they will still have their original Voyager bib ID in 035. Or is a record number that might exist. And this one comes up as no physical titles, and I believe I understand the reason why. Didn't actually add a holding record to it. So if there is no holding record, it's an important thing, and if you're searching for something that you know should have migrated, and there's no holding record left to it, either you'll have to try it searching for it as electronic titles or searching for all titles, and that gets me our example of a marquette. A marquette, for folks who have not been around CARLI or iShare as long, are remnants of a long ago, the first version of iShare called LCS, where very brief records were entered in to provide circulation services. And these bib records still exist in probably about 30 or so databases. If you joined since we've been on Voyager, or even since we've been on DRA, you should probably not have any of these. But the libraries that do have them pretty much know who they are. And these records are really pretty much short records that don't have much more than this. You will certainly want to find some of these brief records, or you could also look for records that are used for acquisitions in a similar way, where they're not really full records. They might have a basic amount of data. So let me go back to our search. There's another broader way to look for records like these marquettes or records that might not be OCLC sourced. And while we have the other system number search up, we can choose, instead of containing keywords, not contains. We could choose not contains keywords or not contains phrase. And OCLC record numbers all have this OCOLC tacked on the front of them. If I click search at this point, we can now see that there are a number of bib records in this institution zone that exist without bib record or OCLC record numbers, and that could be because they're vendor records or they're short records from acquisitions vendor or have come from some other source. Some of these records do have record numbers attached, such as this top one on Greek art. I can click for more information and see all of the record numbers that are present. There's this 640-22936, and then TRN. This is the training database record number. Another record here. Also a training database migration and something else. It is possible that some records, here's this 100 Years of Organ Music, has no record number whatsoever. And why would you want to find these? You would want to be looking for these to sort of double check were these records in your system before and you've gotten the right data across. Checking to see whether data has been removed from your records is another option. Some other options, we've asked folks to look at their local notes, and you were asked to identify records that had local notes as one of the options. Listed on the bibliographic records checklist. And searching local notes is a valid search field on this search list. So if I chose local notes and then choose gift as a keyword, if I had a 5XX, like a 59X field or a 9XX field where I had stored local notes information and gift was part of that, I would be able to retrieve the records that have that detail accordingly. And we can see where this lives. It should be in here are several 590s with the word gift as we expected. If you are choosing to look for records that were suppressed in Voyager and should have come over as suppressed, suppression is another option on the search screen. Is the tag suppressed title, and we can choose equals or not equals. If we want to choose suppression as equals yes. Let's see what came over. And we have a few records, mostly databases that are not visible to people in Primo VE. Let's see. Another area where you may want to do some more broad level searching for what migrated and testing different formats is to look at the records that came through by their Voyager bib format field. And that is available in Alma in two different search fields, where we can search for bib format and then choose the value that applies to the first character, the leader 06. And then we can add a row to this search and choose bibliographic level. And if I'm interested in seeing how many serial records migrated, bib format AS and search, and we've got 13,473 bib records that are serials. I could just do the same thing for switching over to monographs. And now we get 161,000. Again, the difference is too, I've still got all titles selected here. If I change to physical titles, let me see how many serials I have that have Mfhds still. Now we're down to 31 serial records that were migrated as physical resources. You don't have to, or your physical title searches is not limited to searching bib level details. You can also search holdings level details. So if I click the down arrow and instead choose a field from the holdings area, I can then choose options like to search for holdings records IDs, holdings notes. This holdings note is your 852 note, the subfield X or subfield Z. If I want to search by call number, I choose permanent call number, and I want to use a phrase. Let me do HD53 to get it started. And when searching for call numbers, permanent call number, you actually have to select both the permanent call number field and the permanent call number type so that Alma knows which classification scheme to search. So let me click that. And so now we have two records that matched HD53. This is HD53, C574. And this is also HD53B79. If I wanted to use a starting with and a broader kind of search, I could choose exact phrase starting with, and I get 3 records in this case, which includes one record where the call number is HD5325. Demonstrating these searches because it'll take some getting used to. Also to point out that this is not a shelf list search, but it is a way to find records by call number scheme. And you'll probably be doing that a lot in double checking your holdings. But each of these schemes that are loaded in Alma are available as the search. And just to demonstrate what happens if you didn't have the call number type selected, we get an error. You must select a call number type in addition to the call number per perform search. We asked in the migration worksheets to include some records that have summary holdings, and there is a search option for that. And if we wanted to search for records where we were lacking some value, and we've got nothing for that, which is okay. But maybe we also wanted to see what summary holdings have something 1990 in it, and so on. go back. You also have an option in some cases to search for places where the data is missing completely and find summary holdings is empty. And this is bringing back lots of records because summary holdings will be empty on monographs mostly. So this may not work without us also going back to say bibliographic level equals serial. And now we have 29 records, including this first one here, outdoor photographer, and we can view the holdings record. And there it does just have an 852. There are no summary holdings in 866. Now, if I was migrating this record and it had an 866, this would be a cause for concern. It's not there anymore. But if it wasn't there in the first place, it won't be there now, and that's okay. Finally, you can, in addition to bibs and holdings, you can search on physical item record fields. And I just tab into the physical item. And what we will probably be doing a lot, all of us, will be searching for things by the item barcode. And here's physical item, barcode is the option. And we can do as a keyword or phrase. Let me get rid of that. Look for record A12345. And here is a holding record view, and we can see more from that. If I'm searching for items particularly, I'll be better off if I choose physical items from the results as the scope for the search, and then performing barcode search. Because the way the information displays on this Alma screen is more specific to what you see in an item record. Here's A12345 and the item record details that I could also then go into the record and view more completely. So that's searching for your bibs, Mfhds, and item data in general. When searching for acquisitions data, you have a smaller set of options. You'll be looking for order lines, invoices, vendors, funds, and those of you who've migrated enough electronic data from Summon or 360 may have some licenses as well. For order lines, we can generally do searches by title, and I can search again, even though I have it on the screen. I can search for order lines for this outdoor photographer title. This is a title that is on a purchase order and PO line number 283. These can be and probably will be numbers assigned in some cases by Alma. PO numbers may come over from Voyager as they were in the acquisition system. But so during the Vanguard phase, we saw that there were some tricks that weren't always obvious for searching for things by PO number or PO line number. So hopefully you have other details such as the title or other detail information. Again, standard number is an option for the search here. And so if you had an ISSN, you would choose standard number to continue with the search. And here we'll just, again, copy from the example right in front of us. as such. Searching for order lines does include an advanced search option. And when this will be really useful in looking for places where you're migrated your fund details, specifically your reporting funds, and those will have been converted from reporting funds into reporting codes in Alma. So I could choose reporting code. It used to be a reporting fund in Voyager. Reporting code was created, and it created a list of options that are here in this drop-down to choose. So I want to find order lines where the reporting code was print book. In your databases, this could have been subject matter, English, archaeology, art, French, or it could have been book, electronic, serial, etc. So your codes will vary from what you see here. I could also choose to add other options to the search if I were limiting just to a specific title or or PO types or line types. And finally, also, there's an option you can search for the actual fund names. These will be funds that are either the ledger name or the reported or allocated fund from Voyager or summary fund. So we can look for English as an example. If we have an English fund, fund name contains keywords English, no records were found. I went back too far. But I can also search for, this is what I want to do here, search for funds. And where I was before was searching for line items by a fund, and I didn't find any. Do I even have an English fund? Well, it says at the moment, English funds and ledgers, English status active for FY 2020. Now, this is a database where we did not do any fiscal period rollover. In this case, the funds names are more general, like electronic books, and there are electronic collections. And this is showing us the fund name and then the path, and then the deeper the path is, the deeper it is in the ledger, whereas acquisitions budget in this case is the actual top level for this ledger. Searching for funds does not have an advanced search option. Neither does searching for vendors or searching for invoices. But these other searches have fewer options that are more inclusive. All is by itself a general keyword search that will help you locate your vendors or funds or other options. If I do a vendor search on Gobi, it brings me immediately to the vendor code, and I can view the vendor record as it migrated. Finally, searching for invoices, you can search for your invoice number, either using all, or you can explicitly say this is an invoice number. You can also choose to search by the title from a purchase order line. And find the details that you wanted. So we will be I'll point out at this point, we will be posting a copy of these helpful searches up to the website sometime after this session. Meanwhile, I'm going to turn over control to Debbie. Who can take it away?
Debbie, I've just made you the presenter, but would it be okay to pause to catch up on the chat a little bit? There's been quite a bit of activity.
I'll go ahead and get my screen going, but that sounds great.
Yeah, Debbie and Lori, our consultant, had shared quite a bit of information. I just want to summarize a few things for folks that might not have been multitasking and reading the chat. So one of the questions was that many of these records seem to have the same MMS ID, but actually they were a little bit different, and Debbie pointed out that MMS IDs are kind of unique identifiers for the bibliographic records, and they all start with 99, and the last 4 digits for an institutional record will always have your unique institution code. In some cases, you will see a network zone institution number if the record is linked to the network zone. Someone else had asked another question where they had been seeing the network icon or the community icon next to records, and they were confused because that was appearing in an institutional search. And that indicates that the record is either linked to the community or the network zone. Network, you can also think of as shared or CARLI record. Our starting point for that is your union catalog, but that will evolve and is a little bit different functionally. But for now, it's good to think of it as a shared record. So I wanted to clarify those points. Was there anything else that you responded to, Debbie, that you wanted to clarify before we move on?
All that I put in was a couple links to the Ex Libris website. So if anyone else has something they'd like to clarify, please feel free.
I think the thing I was sensing I was not remembering was someone asked if it was possible to customize the search options. And yes, it is possible to customize what appears in the search field drop-downs from both the basic and the advanced search. That was what was on the tip of my tongue there. So I'll clear the way for Debbie.
All right, thanks, Ben and everybody. As Ted mentioned, I'm going to talk about some of the searching that you'll do for the fulfillment portion of your data review. And so I wanted to start with fulfillment with just a reminder of the resources you'll have available, because I'm going to be flipping back to some of those to remind you of things that you'll want to have handy when you're doing your review for fulfillment. So here on the screen, during other data review office hours that we've held, including the one last week, which we'll have posted soon, we've mentioned resources you'll want to have available as you perform your Voyager to Alma migration data review. So I've got the screen here on the window. I've got the screen here up for our data migration review procedures. And the documents that we'll flip back and forth between are your data migration review worksheets. And so this will hopefully look familiar. We'll also be looking at the Voyager to Alma migration guide briefly. And so I have that on a tab, and that's linked from our page as well. You'll have your library's migration form by that point. So your library filled out different spreadsheets and a survey from us, and we combined that together into your migration form. You'll want to have that handy because you did make some decisions. Your library did make some decisions on that migration form, which may affect how you'll want to do some review of your fulfillment examples. Then I also wanted to point out, we have it linked from our migration page, but Ex Libris has a handy testing fulfillment data migration to Alma script. And so we'll look at this a little bit, and I like this because it does include some screenshots too. As we've discussed previously, the scenarios that you'll want to review in Alma, your initial goals when you're reviewing is to double check that your library's data migrated as expected. So first in that phase 1, you'll just be making sure your data came in as expected. Then during phase 2, CARLI will announce that and your library can begin to make some changes. I'm just mentioning that now because if you're using this Ex Libris testing script, there are scripts for both of those phases. There's a portion which is reviewing, there's a portion which is doing additional testing. So during phase 1, you'll want to just do the reviewing steps and not those additional testing steps. Okay. So we'll take a look back at your data review examples, and I'm going to move to page 24, which is where the patron borrower records come in. So forgive me while I scroll here for a second. I don't mean to make you all dizzy. So page 24, getting close. Here we are. So with your patron borrower records section, I wanted to point out real quick that you'll see a lot of post-migration comments in this column. What those are doing is they're trying to briefly explain what we expect the data to do when it migrates from Voyager into Alma related to that specific scenario.
Debbie, sorry to interrupt, but somebody asked if you could zoom in just a little bit.
Oh, sure. And I'm afraid I can't see the chat for some reason, so thank you, Jen. If anything else comes up, please let me know. So let me zoom. Let's try 150. Oh, that'll be too much, 1450. Okay. So is that a little bit better, hopefully? Okay. So you'll see that there's those comments listed there. And what CARLI staff did when we were adapting this guide is we looked at Ex Libris's Voyager to Alma migration guide, and we reviewed that guide for relevant sections to see what we expected the data to do when it came into Voyager. So the comments there are based on what was in that guide and also what we saw in the Vanguard process. So thinking about patrons. So we'll come back to this. You've seen these examples. We're going to switch over into Alma now. And I'm using Alma Sandbox number 1. Let me figure out where I put it. There it is. I've already logged into this sandbox, and this is one that you have access to, so you're welcome to try some tests in there. So from what I've seen so far, Alma has 3 primary ways that you can search for patron records. And patron records are that first section that we're going to start with. We'll take a look briefly at those 3 so that you can be able to locate your own examples from Voyager in Alma when it's time for the data review. Let's see here. If you've reviewed Alma searching videos, these steps will probably look familiar. So the first option is you saw Ted doing some searching from this menu bar here. One of the options in this menu bar is for users. When you've got users selected, this context drop down next to it will change. And that'll give you some options for ways to look at your patron data. The choices are all, email, first name, identifiers, job category, and we'll learn about job categories in Alma more at a later date. I don't expect any of your migrated in patrons to have those assigned. Last name, middle name, primary identifier, and then general user information. I want to point out that primary identifier does seem to mean that it's the data that your library named the primary identifier in Alma. So from your migration guide, you may have picked your institution ID, you may have picked a different number, but if you plan to do any searches by primary identifier using that limit, you'll want to check your migration guide to see what you picked for your library. If you're not sure, if you just want to search more generally, the all option seems to work well for patrons. So that's the first option, is that users and then all. A second option, which you'll see in the Ex Libris guide, so again, that was that PDF. I'll just click real quick. And then over to the patrons option they have here. So again, some screenshots they have available. So the option that they describe is to go to admin, if you have it available to you based on the role you're logged in with. And then you could go to user management and manage users. The benefit to this view is that, and it's also a consequence if you have a lot of patrons potentially, but you can see in this view just by going to admin and then manage users, it actually starts listing all of the users that you have saved in the system below. You can then apply different filters or search within them to try to narrow that list down as appropriate. The third option, and this is the one that you'll be working with a lot as we move forward with Alma, so you'll want to become familiar with it, is to go to Fulfillment and then Manage Patron Services. This is the method that after we have the automated fulfillment set up and you'll need to search for iShare Library patrons, this is how you'll go to do that. After the automated fulfillment network is set up, there'll be an additional checkbox on the screen that will allow you to choose your user's affiliation, their institutional affiliation. Since this is a sandbox, that's not available here, but at some point you'll see that in your test database. So we'll do some brief searches in those three options. But first I have a little bit of background just I've found from searching in Alma for patrons. So first, I think it's important to note that Alma does not do partial matching in the way that Voyager does. In Voyager, you could enable, I think it was called the truncate search option, so that you could just type the first letter of a last name and the first letter of a first name and find every patron who had that combination of initials. But in Alma, you can use an asterisk as a wildcard character. So for example, if I search, I'll just search up here in users all. If I search for Russ, no records were found. But if I search for Russ with an asterisk, you can see then I find 3 patrons. So Kathleen Russ, Russ Sandow, and then Russell Martin. The asterisk allowed me to get the Russell. If I search for just Russ, I get the 2 patrons who have Russ as either a first or last name, since I'm using an all search. So you'll want to be aware of this, that it does search differently than how Voyager does, and that you need to type a complete name or be prepared to use that asterisk with a partial name. In the Fulfillment Manage Patron Services option, so again, that was Fulfillment and then Manage Patron Services, I found that if you type too quickly here, at least in the sandbox, and I tend to type quickly and I also make typos, but if you tend to type too quickly, you can get false negatives. So for example, if I type Russ and I'm going to type it as fast as I can and hit enter, I get an alert on the side on the right that says patron was not found. And in this case, it's a false negative. This Fulfillment Manage Patron Services, when you type slowly, so let me do that again, clear my error. Hope I'll use that arrow. When you type slowly, you'll notice what it starts to do after you hit that third letter. Is there was a little wheel that spun for a second, and it starts to pull up the patrons that match the search, and then it begins to narrow to them. So if you're using the Fulfillment Manage Patron Services, you'll type slowly, and then you'll actually select the patron from the drop-down, and then you would click Go. Okay. So from the Fulfillment Manage Patron Services, let's take a look at this record. And so you can, so again, type slowly. You can enter the patron's identifiers in that search, such as an IID, a barcode, the name, any other primary identifiers in that search. From here, it'll open to, since we're under the fulfillment menu, it's actually going to open to the screen that talks about this patron's fulfillment activities. So you can see the tabs we have are loans, returns, requests, and network activity. Things to note here with these tabs, if a tab has a dog ear, that means the tab contains data for the patron. So kind of like how dog-eared pages in a book indicate that there's use, when patrons maybe are a little messier than we'd hope. But a dog-eared tab here also means that tab is in use and it contains data for you to review. So for Kathleen Russ, this dog ear on the loans tab means that this patron has some things checked out. You'll notice the default here too, at least with how I have it set in the sandbox, is it's going to show me the loans of this session. That can be confusing because we're looking for migrated data. So you'd want to switch that to all loans. I think there's an option to decide how that default displays, whether it shows all loans always or just the session. And I think we might have set that on the migration form, but it's all blurring together at this point. So when you're looking at your examples of your patron and you're trying to see which things are checked out, you can search for the patron that has the checked out items, and then you can go ahead and then use the loans tab to see what they have checked out. So you'll be checking the due date, the title, the information about the item, the barcode, to make sure those transactions came over correctly. To get from here to the patron's regular data, you can click on the ID that they have. You can click on any active balance they have. You can also click where it says Edit User Info, All three of those options will take you into more information about the patron. So for now, I'll just click Edit User Info, and that takes us to the stuff we're kind of used to seeing in the Voyager patron record. So we've got the name, the primary identifier, which may be the IID if that's what you selected. The patron's patron group we're used to seeing from Voyager is here in User Group. Their expiration date is here. If you scroll down, you'll see there's different email address and addresses. So that'll be here. Now we'll do a search, so let me hit cancel. I'm going to do a search for the same patron using this Users All option. You can see my patron information here on the screen. I could click back to get out of it, or I can go ahead and do a new search. So I'll search again for Russ and click search. There are my two patrons. When I search using this Users All option and then I click on the patron name, I'm instead taken to a different view than the management one. So you can see here I've got that general information tab, and I have my other tabs available across here as well. So general information, it's divided then the other information into separate tabs. So contact information is here. This is where we'll see those addresses, phone number. Identifiers include additional ones that may be added, like the patron's barcode or institution ID, depending on how those are. If the patron has notes, they would be on this note tab, which is blank for this patron. No dog ear means no information. If there were blocks, those would be listed on this tab. Fines and fees on the fine and fee tab. If there was statistical information, it would be available there. So the statistical categories, if you brought those over, etc. So this information from the patron record will help you answer a lot of those patron record review questions that you have set up. I'm going to take a look real quick at our worksheets again. So again, a lot of these, we'll just start at the top again. So patrons representing different patron groups, patrons with different IDs. I'm going to take this as a chance to look at those comments. So like I mentioned, these comments in this row came from the Voyager to Alma migration guide. And here's what I want to point out. Patron notes are migrated to a different number of note types. These are what they will become. Down here is another one about addresses. So every postal and every email address will be assigned all of the address types upon migration to Alma. After migration, you can clean those up manually or using the batch load processes. So where these came from is back over on the website to the Voyager to Alma migration guide. And what I'd like to do is to mention that staff who will be doing review of the fulfillment activities, I'd recommend they take a look at the fulfillment section of this guide. So I'm going to scroll down, and this web page is super long, but the table of contents is really helpful. And you'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner, there is this up arrow. So if you've scrolled towards the bottom and you want to get back to the top to the table of contents, that little up arrow will take you back to the table of contents. So section 3.1 is where I'm going to go. So 3.1 is the section that was where your library answered questions about fulfillment on the migration form. So you can see how does this affect potentially the data you'll be reviewing in Alma. So example, which identification number was set as primary? That describes the decision your library made, and most libraries picked institution ID. I'll go back to the top again. Section 3.2 is just additional information that it'll be helpful for whoever's reviewing fulfillment examples from Voyager in Alma. It'll just be helpful for them to know. So for example, there are a few to take a look at here. This is where we got the information for those comments, as I mentioned. So for example, barcode statuses will be mapped as either active or inactive. Active barcodes will be active. If they are lost, expired, stolen, other, they will become inactive. Information about the patron addresses came from here. So again, no attempt is made to determine what type of address came in. They will be set at all of them. You can adjust them later. It's information too to say like, hey, proxy patrons are not migrated. So any proxy information is stored in a loan note for those active transactions that were initiated by a proxy. So we have some examples where we've asked you to look for a proxy patron. You can double check that it came in as expected but you'll want to be familiar with this section. Let's see. The other thing I want to look at is that, or to mention first, is that since this is a sandbox, we are looking at test data, but we are not looking at migrated test data. So when you're reviewing patrons and you're reviewing things or doing sample tests in the sandbox, you're looking at test data but not migrated data. So I wanted to mention I'm planning to do another, probably a pre-recorded video of what to expect for your migrated iShare patrons. When I go back to the top of this guide, it's actually Appendix D, so the very last section. Appendix D is all about how iShare patrons and iShare requests come into Alma, so we'll have more information about that as well. You're already aware that changes are coming in that we did not have you map those 4 UB iShare patron groups into Alma on your configuration form. We'll be replacing those at a future date with a new patron group, so we'll have some more examples about how those migrated records come in. Scott, are there any questions that I can't see in the chat before I go on to the next section?
Nothing right now.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I'll go on to the next section from your guide. So I'm going to scroll here to the loans section. So let me get to that page. I'll go back to the table of contents real quick to make sure I don't scroll too much. So charge transactions are on page 32. So make you dizzy again for a second here while I move forward. Okay, so the next section you were busy gathering examples for, or you will be gathering those examples for, is for charge transactions. So there are 19 examples in this section. And so again, those comments are there. And we'll go back to the migration guide so you can see where those came from. So again, back to the top. And then back in section 3 again. So there's a whole section here on loans. So you'll want to take a look at that for information. So again, it explains how loans are migrated. It talks about how we're expecting fines and fees to come over. And there's also a section on requests. And so for example, for requests, we're expecting the items that were on the hold shelf, those will migrate. Anything that was requested but not sitting on the hold shelf for a patron, those will not migrate. So those are things you may be checking. Also for fines and fees, those active and outstanding patron fines should migrate to Alma. But since the structure of Alma and Voyager is similar but yet somehow different, we may find that the fines and fees are not actually linked to the item for which the patron owes. So we'll want to double check that as well. So let's go back to Alma for a moment. I'm going to search for my patron again. So Russ. So again, one of the ways you can check for materials that are on loan is by finding the patron record that you know the loan was given to. When I search using the users all and I'm at the patron information, to get from here to the patron's fulfillment activities, I would click on Manage Fulfillment Activities. And that takes you back to the Loans, Returns, Request, Network Activity option. This screen you're seeing here, remember that's the default search if you go to Fulfillment, Manage Patron Services, and you search for your patron here. When you search that way, that Loans, Returns, Request, Network Activity option is the first thing you see, and then you can go either to the patron's fines this way by clicking on the active balance or by doing that Edit User Info. So you can toggle back and forth depending on which view you start on. If I look at the Ex Libris guide again, so I'm back here, you can see they have a section on searching for loans. They've got some screenshots. So again, they mention you can search for the patron first, that you know something is checked out to. They also have this advanced option I'm not going to demonstrate, but that you're welcome to check, especially in the sandbox would be a great time to try. They've got options here for setting up a set of things that are on loan. So you can gather a list of all of the things that are loaned and review them that way. So they've got directions here and they've got screenshots. When you're reviewing those fines and fees, again, you can search for a patron that you know who has the fines and fees. And the Ex Libris guide has a fines and fees section as well, so you can take a look that way. So that's real fast on fines and fees and charges, because once you've learned how to search for the patron, and you're aware of looking in the Voyager to Alma migration guide, you've got a lot of that background information already. There are 18 sample charge transactions that we have in our test load migration worksheets. Again, take a look at those post-migration comments. If you want to follow up, look at the Voyager guide. You're always welcome to ask us here at CARLI too. The 19th example in the guide, and let me just scroll back over there, go to number 19. For number 19, the Alma TOU testing examples, it's good to go ahead and have that gathered. So you've got one patron representing each patron group and one item representing each item type and location. What we'll do at a later point is we will talk about how to test the configuration settings that you've enabled in Alma. And so we'll use the fulfillment configuration utility to test those policies. So you don't need to worry about number 19 for now. We'll come back to that one later. Finally, in our last 4 minutes, I'll just mention reserves really quick. Before you begin searching for examples of course reserves in Alma, you'll want to review your library's migration form to double check which reserves your library actually chose to migrate for the test load. Of course, you can change that for the production load if needed, but if you chose not to migrate reserves, you can double check to make sure they did not come in, but you wouldn't want to spend a lot of time wondering why you can't find them if they're not there. So your library could have chosen to migrate none, active, or all. So knowing that will help you find relevant examples. Back at the migration guide, so let me click back there, and back to the top. There is section 3.2. Section 3.2.3. So course information, mig rules, and assumptions. So you can take a look at that, and it talks about how that information comes in. And it talks about explanation, which explains what you see when you review your examples. So there are 3 sections of the guide, but whoever's checking your reserve examples will want to read the notes that pertain to reserves. So for example, in Alma, a reserve list may be assigned to one and only one course. In Voyager, a reading list could have multiple courses linked to it, so that'll affect the way you see that migration come in. Also in Alma, a reading reserve list can exist without an attached course, but in Alma there needs to be a course attached, so they'll be migrated to a generated course called no course. You may also know you'll want to review this duplicate course sections and code section to make sure that what you're seeing is expected. So that gives an example of what those codes might look like. So at the Ex Libris testing guide again, I'll go back there. They've got a section on reviewing course reading, which is the reserves, what we've called reserves in Voyager. There are 2 kinds of course reading records, course records and reading lists, and so you'll want to review them both. When I've been thinking about this, the course records seem kind of like the header and then the linked courses that we would do, whereas the reading list is the citation list. We'll do just one quick search in Alma, and then we'll be at our end of time. So back to Alma. From here, you go to Fulfillment, and then you can go to, under Course Reserves, Courses. Searching this way can give you a list of all of the all of the courses that are here in Alma. You can see information about them. Then you can click on that code to see more of those details. So this is a lot of that Voyager reserve header information. So you've got course information, your start date, your end date, the instructors who are associated. I don't believe there'll be anything for notes because Voyager didn't have that functionality, and we see how campus works out if your library set up a campus. So that fulfillment, and then course reserves courses, that's going to look like a lot of the reserve header information, and then also the linked courses and instructors that you had filled in the bottom of the reserve menu from Voyager. The other part is reading lists that you'll want to take a look at. And so with reading lists, it's going to open to the Assigned to Me tab, which you probably won't have many assigned to you, if any, since this is migrated data. So you'll want to switch over to All. In that all, you'll then be able to see a list of the reading lists and the courses to which they're assigned. You'll click on the code. And then once you're there, you'll see more information again. Some of this is pulled in from those from the courses that we already took a look at, but the citations example, these are what are on reserves for the course. So you'll check the citations, make sure that what is in this Alma reading list matches what was in your Voyager course reserve for the course. You can see that for these. If it's physical, it'll let you see the holdings. If there's electronic, the electronic would have the number next to it. So again, from your Voyager worksheets, there are 13 questions that have to do with reserves, and those are at the end. Scroll fast. So 13 questions that have to do with reserves that your library will want to check. Take again a look at those migration comments, and you can refer back to the Voyager to Alma migration guide, and that'll help you see what you can expect when that migration occurs. So we're 1 minute over. I'm sorry for that. If you've got any questions, we're happy to hang around and answer them, but thank you very much, everybody. It was a whirlwind tour.
Thanks, Debbie. That was a good quick tour. We just had one question about the extract dates, and I gave a link to Gordon's list of the test migration extract dates, so that folks can, be sure they're finding examples in their Voyager data before that date to be sure that, it's data we actually intended to migrate. And then a question just came in asking for a link to that Ex Libris guide, but I think you already have that in your CARLI list in the data review page that Jen just dropped in the chat as well.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yes.
So thanks, Jen.
Those are from the, let me start at the CARLI homepage. From the CARLI homepage, if you go to Products and Services, Alma and Primo VE, there under Important Links and Resources, we have the, let me get the right one, Alma Data Migration Review Procedures. So the dates of the extract are here under this Identifying Test Cases, the dates when library data were extracted. The Data Migration Review worksheets I kept referring to are linked up here. And then down below, yes, then the Ex Libris guides are available here under Step 5. And the Voyager to Alma Migration Guide I referenced a lot also is here in Step 3.
Perfect. Thanks for showing that.
And I just wanted to add really quick that I think I said this last week, but we will be sharing your migration forms that go with this Voyager to Alma Migration Guide in your box folder before the test environments are delivered. So you will receive those before you receive your test environment.
And as Ted mentioned, we'll pull out the click paths and different examples. We're planning to make that into a web page to summarize everything we talked about this week, and then the examples that Lori gave us last week as well. And I imagine that would be linked from this web page. All right, well, if there's no further questions, thanks for your time, everybody.
Not that I see, so I think we'll call it. Thanks, everybody, for the good questions and your attention. We will talk to you all soon.